This highly successful period is capped by the birth of a son, Isambard, in 1806.
Britain was sort of on the cusp of the Industrial Revolution really having an impact on people's lives. So he was born into a place where things had been done the same way for centuries. People were sailing wooden boats, they were travelling in coaches and horses.
For the very first time, you've got machinery, you've got science, you've got steam power, you've got coal, all of these things coming into their own in a very new kind of way. So a lot of the technologies that later become the kinds of things that he himself is very involved with, when he's born, they're also being born.
So there was a huge amount of scope for somebody to come in and kind of change technology and engineering to make people's lives different and better.
The world in which Mark Brunel raised his son was changing fast. He knew that conditions were ripe for radical thinkers with big ideas.
He started to groom Isambard as an engineer when he was a very young child.
He was being taught natural history, so going on walks with his father and his family and looking at different things that they were seeing, learning the names of them. So the earliest object we have in the collection that relates to his life is a little sketch of a horse. He drew it when he was 6 years old, so it really gives you an idea of just how sort of talented he was. I really love this because the horse looks like it's in motion. And then in the corner is Isambard, and that's written in his father's hand. And I like to think that his proud father saw him draw this, then wrote his name on it. And today you might sort of put it on a fridge or something like that. So he's keeping it as a memento of how impressed he is with his son.
Determined to encourage his talents, Mark is keen that Isambard is given every chance to flourish. He introduces his son to some of the greatest minds of the day, such as the godfather of precision, locksmith Joseph Bramah.
When Isambard was only about 11, he takes part in this competition by Joseph Bramah to try and pick one of his locks. And so a whole bunch of engineers all sitting around with this 11-year-old Isambard Brunel trying to see if they can crack his latest technological advancement there in lockmaking, which they don't manage to do, but it just gives you an idea, I think, of the kinds of circles that Isambard would have been brought up in. You know, literally at the knees of many of the country's greatest engineers.
The father recognises at a very young age that his son has this potential, great potential. Good at science, mathematics, draw, artist and a scientist, incredible combination. So Mark recognises this, and rather than giving him the standard education of a young English gentleman off to Eton or Harrow, he sends him to a progressive school in Hove, where he is encouraged in his talent.
A 13-year-old Isambard writes home to his mother, revealing a precocious scholar wanting to follow in his father's footsteps.
I have been making half a dozen boats recently, till I have worn my hands to pieces. I have also taken a plan of Hove, which is a very amusing job. I should be much obliged if you would ask Papa, I hope he is well and hearty, whether he would lend me his long measure, for I want a more exact plan.
And then, at age 14, he's sent to Paris, because only in Paris is there a school that Mark believes is adequate for his son's genius.
Technical colleges have been set up in France and really pushed during the 1790s actually to improve the army, but it meant that there was a level of mathematical and technical instruction available that didn't exist in Britain. Engineering in Britain at the time was very much practically led. Isambard had the background that allowed him to not be led completely by practical demands. It's trying to figure out what's possible and what can be done.
We have one of the school reports. It's in French, obviously, but it does go through the different subjects he's studying. Unfortunately, he's very good in almost everything. There's no sign that, could do better or never make anything of himself. I think his German leaves a little bit to be desired, but apart from that, it's quite good.
At 14, his father also arranges Isambard an apprenticeship with celebrated Parisian clockmaker and manufacturer of scientific instruments, Louis Breguet.
I think that's when Brunel learned
that detail is really important, and that's something that you see running through the whole of his career. He's very, very focused on the minute details of his projects, and that's one of the things that really elevates them above others, because he doesn't just produce something functional, he produces something that's functional and beautiful.
Aside from his father's influence, Isambard's upbringing, divided between England and France, also played a crucial role in shaping his identity.
I think there is a specifically European element to Brunel's character. He's very emotional in lots of ways. He's very quick to anger. He's also, I think, quite eloquent about his own state of mind, which is not a particularly British characteristic.
In 1821, whilst Isambard was in France, his father faced financial ruin back in London. Having sunk large sums of his own money into unprofitable inventions, such as a knitting machine and an embryonic photocopier. Unable to pay off their debts, Mark and Sophia were arrested and later jailed at the King's Bench prison, Southwark.
When Mark was in prison for debt, he threatened to go to Russia to serve the Tsar. He had a job offer to go to Russia and essentially says, if you don't bail me out, then I'll leave. And so the government actually stumps up about £5,000 to bail him out of debt, so that on the condition that he would stay in the country. His status as a refugee or as an immigrant meant that there was always the risk for the British that he would go elsewhere.
Isambard was almost lost to the country of his birth before his career had even begun.
So the idea of Isambard Kingdom Brunel as the great British engineer, I think, is potentially a bit of a myth. That in some ways, had things even gone just slightly differently, he could have been a great Russian engineer or a great French engineer or a great American engineer.
Mark Brunel's talents were highly regarded in Britain, and influential figures such as the Duke of Wellington helped ensure his release. But the teenage Isambard was profoundly affected by his parents' imprisonment.
It was something that Isambard never forgot, and the family never forgot, because that family embarrassment lived with him all through his career, and so maybe that was something that drove him.
16-year-old Isambard returned to London from Paris to join his father's engineering practice. He helped to design everything from paddle tugs on the River Rhine to a sawmill in Trinidad, quickly establishing himself as less an apprentice, more a junior partner.
When we talk about Brunel, it's not always clear if we're talking about Isambard Kingdom Brunel or Sir Mark Isambard Brunel. And sometimes people argue the toss about who did what and who's capable of what and who should take the credit for what. I like to think of them as a team.
But the relationship is incredibly close. I say the best way to think of it is one person, two bodies, a continuation of Mark's genius.
Now just think about that kind of attachment. You've got a father here who wants his son to follow in his footsteps and be the very best he can, a genius and nothing less. I think from a parent to a child, that kind of ambition might sow the seeds of a child who always wants to please their parent, and a child who may see themselves and their identity as about their competence, how good they actually are.
Young Isambard Kingdom Brunel embraced the path that his father had set for him. We know he was as keen, as ambitious as his father was. I think it's fair to say that in everything he did, his father was there as an expert, as a loving father, as a source of advice and criticism.
The fulfillment of Isambard's vast ambitions now meant stepping out from his father's considerable shadow. An opportunity presents itself. when both Brunels begin work on a tunnel under the River Thames in 1825.